Apologize, I've got my papers all out of order this morning. All right. So, I'll just milk it for a little while here. Okay. All right. So, after being out of my house most of the day yesterday, I got home in the evening to a very needy dog. I could hear him whining through the door before I even opened it. He had heard the garage door open, and he was waiting just inside the house, very noisily, I might add, for me to open the door from the garage into the house. Max is my German Shepherd. Max's needs are simple, and he's not shy about letting me know when he needs a walk, or food, or water, or to go out at night, usually at like 2 a.m., unfortunately. I don't think he struggles with suppressed or hidden needs that he's not aware of. Whenever he feels a need, he tends to just tell me. Sometimes, once I've walked Max, fed him, put out clean water, and made sure he has access to the backyard so he can do his business, he still comes over to me, often as I'm trying to answer emails or get some other work done, and he whines. And if I don't respond to the whining, he likes to paw at my leg, just in case I, couldn't hear him or something. And I think, I have met all of your needs. What could you possibly want? And then, of course, I remember, not all of our needs are physical. Max needs love. And in this case, love means scratches behind the ears and me telling him he's a good boy. Now, this is true for us, of course, too. Not necessarily the needing the scratches behind the ears part, but that we do need acceptance and love and other needs that extend beyond the physical. But recognizing our own needs can be difficult. Maybe not as often with the physical stuff. I think we generally know when we're tired or hungry. And although we may trick ourselves into thinking we can operate in these conditions better than we do, and sometimes we ignore or confuse our physical needs, like when we convince ourselves that all we need is a cup of coffee to keep going, when what we probably really need is to get some sleep. But again, recognizing the physical needs is generally not all that challenging. It's the variety of those other types of needs that can be harder to distinguish and make sense of. Emotional needs, social needs, spiritual needs, and even theological needs are often not as easily recognizable to ourselves as physical needs. Unlike physical hunger, where you can fix it by grabbing a sandwich, satisfying a spiritual hunger is generally not so simple. And this is where the support of a beloved community, just like this one, comes in. While we're capable of meeting some of our needs on our own, many of the non-physical needs that we have are better met with the help of others, through relationships and communities of supportive people. In fact, this is one of the primary purposes of belonging to a beloved community: to help others meet their needs and to find help in meeting our own. We are called both to be a helper and to be helped. Now, in a community this size, the emotional needs are many. But being a community of this size also means that we have a great capacity to meet those needs. Since launching the pastoral care team back in February, it has been truly amazing to watch the folks on this team reach out and offer support and respond to the requests and needs that are sent in by email or filled out on a prayer card. And what I've observed is that a huge part of what the care team does is show up. This might mean a home or a hospital visit while someone recovers from an injury or illness. It might mean a phone call to check in if we've heard you're going through a difficult time. And in these cases where the needs are more emotional than physical, the caring presence of a care team member can provide a lot of comfort and well-being when we're in a vulnerable place. And while the care team members do this in an official capacity, the rest of us who belong to this community and participate here can do this informally with each other, to some degree at least. Showing up, being present, and actively listening goes a long way. In coffee hour, for example, this can be the difference between, "Hey, how's it going?" and "How are you doing?" and then actually waiting for an honest response. This is the power of being present and actively listening. It can happen in covenant groups, committee meetings, and potlucks. And more than any response that we might offer to their answer, more than any advice that we might be able to give, our healing power actually lies in the caring act of the listening itself. In his book, Hidden Wholeness, Quaker educator Parker Palmer wrote, "When you speak to me about your deepest questions, you do not want to be fixed or saved. You want to be seen and heard, to have your truth acknowledged and honored. If your problem is soul deep, your soul alone knows what you need to do about it. And my presumptuous advice will only drive your soul back into the woods. So the best service I can render when you speak to me about such a struggle is to hold you faithfully in a space where you can listen to your inner teacher." Most of us, so carefully schooled in our need to be actively helpful to people, are very surprised to discover the healing power of this kind of listening. Now, Parker points out here to us that ultimately, we will generally solve our own problems with our own solutions. So it's not the coming up with solutions that we look to others for. It's the compassion they can offer us that serves as a reminder that we should be compassionate to ourselves. It's a reminder of our inherent worth and dignity. When we remember to affirm ourselves, we can have the confidence to decide how to address our own circumstances. Or as Palmer puts it, we can listen to our own inner teacher. And this is the gift we give when we listen deeply and with compassion to others. Now, many of us here are happy to help others when they need it. But generally, we are not so quick to ask for help or accept it for ourselves. Now, there can be a number of reasons for this. The first is that we don't trust that anyone can do what we need as well as we can do it for ourselves. How does that old saying go? If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. We have got to change that thinking. It is to our detriment that we retain the belief that we can do it all on our own. This puts us in a state of need faster and more often, and it makes us unable to help others when they need it. We cannot continue to operate by ignoring our interdependence. The second obstacle to receiving help is that we may not actually recognize our needs. Now, this, I think, is one way to distinguish wants from needs. Generally, a want is intentional, even if it's subconscious. Or more simply put, we know what we want, or have at least an awareness or an attunement to our desires at some level. A need, though, a need might not even register with us. The fact that we need it does not mean that we can always recognize it. Now, sometimes the consequence of an unmet need is so small that we absorb it almost without notice. But the bigger the consequence, the more likely we are to notice the need if it continues to go unmet. And it's also the case that ignoring and absorbing those small consequences of small unmet needs can take its toll over time, building and building until the need can no longer be ignored. So, the better that we know ourselves, the better we become at recognizing our needs, and the better we can be about meeting them. This knowing ourselves can be done through a variety of methods, including spiritual practices and centering exercises and other such things that you might explore in the context of beloved community. A third barrier to accepting help is apathy. And especially for those who serve in a helping profession like nurses, doctors, social workers, counselors, and therapists, there is a risk of being affected by something called compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue sets in when, through the course of helping many people, a helper begins to feel so overwhelmed by the immensity of their needs that they're afraid that their efforts will never be enough to fix the problem. So in addition to the work itself being exhausting, the sense of being helpless and ineffective can lead to apathy. I think this poem, called Compassion Fatigue by Laurie Vanderhart, sums up what it feels like to suffer from compassion fatigue. It means we get tired of caring because there's too much suffering. We block out other people's pain and seal off our hearts safely. Of course, a person can only take so much and do so much, but when it's me in need of empathy, how will I cope with apathy? She closes with a good question. And here's another. When she says we block out other people's pain and seal off our hearts safely, my question is, what is the cost of the safety we get by sealing off our hearts? The cost is we become apathetic, and we can't afford it. We cannot afford to not care. When I hear the word apathy, a line from a Mumford & Sons song comes to mind. If only I had an enemy bigger than my apathy, I could have won. Now, I have found it impossible to love and not care at the same time. So, an apathetic heart means that a world with less love, that's what we get, a world with less love. And we just can't have that. This is a hurting world that needs our love. If only I had an enemy bigger than my apathy, I could have won. So let's win. Let's overcome our apathy by taking on the enemies. I can think of some big ones. Racism, sexism, poverty, militarism, ableism. Let's overcome our apathetic hearts by responding to the world with love. Or, as we Unitarian Universalists are fond of saying, let's love the hell out of the world. But we can't love the hell out of the world until we love ourselves. And so we have to be able to recognize and respond to our own needs, especially those of us who are accustomed to caring for others, so that apathy does not begin to creep in and take hold of our hearts. The Sufis use the metaphor of polishing our hearts. They say that by living, our hearts become tarnished, and by loving, they become polished. And from our reading today by Mark Nepo, he explains that through our love, we reflect the heart of everything. There is no arrival in this process. The goal isn't to stay clean or get dirty, but to stay engaged in the unending transformative cycle of life. And perhaps it is that our work is never done, that we are never in a perfect state of being always the helper and never the helped, of always assisting and never needing. No. Instead, we are called to always be polishing our hearts, to reflect the love of the world, and to keep our hearts from succumbing to apathy. If we can accept this, then maybe we can also accept that we're going to need a little help along the way. May we not be afraid to ask for it, and may it be so.